It's time to count down my top 10 movies of 2022. But before we do that, I want to do a follow-up on my 2021 top 10 list. When I released my top 10 movies of 2021 last January, I had seen 74 movies from that year. I kept almost the same pace in 2022, and as of January 1st of 2023, I've seen 79 movies released in 2022. My top movies are based on my feelings as of today. Those feelings could change tomorrow, and they probably will. In fact, before counting down this year's list, I want to look back at my top 10 movies of 2021 as of January of 2022. This is what the list looked like at that time. However, I saw 24 additional 2021 movies, bringing my total to 97 movies watched from that year. If I remade my list today, this is what the top 10 of 2021 would look like now. With award season right around the corner, there are a lot of 2022 movies that are just now coming out that I haven't had the chance to see yet. And of course, there are a few that have been out for months that I just haven't had time to see yet. These are the movies from 2022 that I think could possibly break into my top 10 once I get to watch them based on what I know about myself. Babylon, Apollo 10.5, Amsterdam, The Menu, The Whale, and Avatar 2. Without further ado, here are my top 10 movies of 2022. I think All Quiet on the Western Front may be the movie that pushes me over the hurdle of where I can no longer say that I don't like war movies. It is both heartbreaking and eye-opening. War is always awful for the soldiers, but I don't think I understood just how awful World War I truly was. This is a dirty, visceral, brutal movie. The opening minutes where we see the life cycle of a soldier's uniform to the change in the demeanor of the soldiers from signing up to fight in the war to when they hit the battlefield to the intense battle scenes which rival those in Saving Private Ryan. This movie is just intense and incredible. And it's hard to believe that it went straight to Netflix. Between this, They Shall Not Grow Old, and 1917, we have gotten some pretty incredible World War I movies over the past few years. Knives Out surprised me back in 2019. It ended up being my favorite movie of that year. I loved Benoit Blanc and his brand of detective work. I was very excited to get another adventure for Blanc and was not disappointed. While I didn't like this movie quite as much as the original Knives Out movie, it may just be because it's a similar formula, so the movie didn't feel quite as fresh and unique as the original did. Even so, the mystery is still highly entertaining and the cast is great. And even if the story and the cast did not live up to my expectations from the first movie, I found that the set pieces and the costumes were actually better this time around, and I'm already looking forward to Knives Out 3. Sometimes I just like a big, dumb action movie, and Ambulance fits that bill perfectly. Jake Gyllenhaal is so intense, and while the plot is ridiculous and there are so many plot holes you could drive a truck through them, it doesn't even matter. It's balls to the wall the entire time. The bank robbery was incredible, the driving scenes are intense, and the tension just keeps ramping up throughout. Every time that I think we have reached the peak of what crazy things can happen, something else goes wrong and it's even crazier. It reminds me of those big 90s action movies like The Rock and Con Air and Speed and Face Off. While Michael Bay overdid it a little bit with the drone shots, it still features the best drone shots I've ever seen in a movie. Just turn your brain off and enjoy the wild ride. Of all of the movies on the list, I think Aftersun is the one that has stuck with me the longest. On the surface, it's a somber film about a father-daughter vacation, but just below the surface, it is the most emotionally complex movie I've seen in a long time. Everyone who watches this is going to project their life experiences onto our characters, and they're going to get something different out of it. It isn't as exciting and crowd-pleasing as some of the other movies are on this list, but it may be the most rewarding to watch. I hear so many people say that every movie today is made for kids and teens. Well, this is a movie made for adults, and people need to see movies made for adults, or they're going to quit making them. I love a good horror movie, and this is a good horror movie. The tone is perfect. It teeters on being too tense, but breaks that tension with some surprisingly good humor. In so many scenes, the characters did exactly what I would have done, which I appreciate. Not saying that I'm smart, I'm just saying that if a guy with a knife is chasing me, I'm not going to run up the stairs to a dead end in my house. I'm looking at you, every horror movie from the 80s and 90s. Barbarian is one of those movies that can satisfy horror aficionados as well as people who don't really like horror movies. It's just a lot of fun. Arguably the greatest director of all time decided to make a fictionalized version of his life and why and how he fell in love with movies. The Fabelmans is full of great performances and that tight Spielberg directing and wonderful John Williams score that has been a staple of movies for the past 50 years. No one captures the magic and wonder of childhood better than Steven Spielberg, and I expect most people who watch this are going to have a stupid smile on their face for most of the runtime. Plus, there's a monkey in it for some reason. Legacy sequels typically feel like cash grabs to me. But, as I've learned, never bet against Tom Cruise. While the story feels familiar and the final chase is basically a remake of that famous scene from Star Wars, it is the most exciting theatrical experience that I had in 2022. The technological marvels it took to get some of these high-speed aerial shots didn't exist back in 1986 when the original movie came out, and so many of them are just jaw-dropping. This movie proves that really doing the stunts makes all of the difference over using a green screen. Watching this gave me the same feels as watching 80s and 90s summer blockbusters, and it also felt like riding a really intense roller coaster. It's predictable and formulaic, but Tom Cruise sells it. His intensity mixed with the fast-paced action pushes this to be the best big-budget blockbuster in years. No one asked for another Batman movie, especially not a 3-hour-long one, but somehow, at least in my opinion, this is one of the best Batman movies to date. This is a superhero movie, but it's wrapped in the narrative structure of the good guys trying to catch a serial killer. Think Seven or Zodiac. While I didn't love emo Bruce Wayne that Robert Pattinson gave us, I found his Batman to be the most brooding and intimidating one that we've ever seen. I love the realism of the Nolan Batman films, but I actually think the realism is better here. Arkham City has never looked darker or wetter or scarier. The Riddlers stink thanks to Paul Dano's great acting is present in every scene of the movie, even if the Riddler isn't in that scene. And Colin Farrell is great and unrecognizable as the Penguin. Add in some hard-hitting fight scenes, John Turturro as Falcone, Andy Serkis as Alfred, Zoe Kravitz as Catwoman, and the best car chase of the year, and you have the recipe for one of the best superhero movies in years. This is the little movie that could. It dropped with little fanfare in early 2022 and has been gaining momentum ever since, and is now in talks of being up for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. With the exception of maybe Charlie Kaufman, Daniels, in my opinion, have the most unique voice in Hollywood. The other two movies the two directors have been involved with, Swiss Army Man and The Death of Dick Long, are some of the most interesting, thought-provoking, weird movies with plots that sound like something a second grader would come up with. Everything Everywhere All at Once features some of the most innovative camera shots I've ever seen, and they were accomplished without any special equipment. The team that put the special effects for this movie together is small enough to fit around a kitchen table. If this film does not win an award for Best Editing at the Academy Awards this year, something is wrong. It is entertaining, even the still shots of rocks in the desert. It is over the top, even the still shots of rocks in the deserts, and it's hilarious. Yes, even the still shots of rocks in the desert. If you want to see a movie unlike any other, look no further. Now, I've talked to several people who now have this movie in the running for their all-time favorite movie. That's how good it is. And before I do my number one movie of the year, I do want to give a couple of special mentions. So my top 10 list is comprised solely of full-length narrative movies, but I saw 3 great documentaries that I loved and want to recommend, as well as another movie that lives rent-free now in my brain. Now, I grew up watching Nolan Ryan at the end of his career, and he was still dominating people half of his age. I was always a fan of Ryan, but watching this gave me a lot more respect for him. He never changed who he was. He is a man who takes his job seriously and is impossible to not love and respect. If you've never heard of Gwar, you wouldn't believe me if I told you what it was. If you've seen the band in concert, I guarantee you left a fan. I love learning about the men and women behind the alien costumes. It's hard to believe this band of nerdy artists has been offending audiences consistently for nearly 40 years. Tony Hawk almost single-handedly made skateboarding as popular as it is. He's easily the most famous skateboarder to ever live. And while he is a great skateboarder, most of his skill comes from his single-minded focus and practice, practice, practice. On top of that, he just seems like a good guy who would be easy to be friends with. I've never been on a skateboard in my life, but I loved every minute of this. A 2.5-hour gore fest about a murderous clown is a hard sell, but since I've seen it, I can't quit thinking about it. It isn't every day that a new horror icon makes its way into the zeitgeist. Even people who will never watch this movie recognize the character of Art the Clown. It isn't a top 10 movie, not even close, but it is a movie that I can't quit talking about. Writer, director, special effects master Damien Leone has propelled himself to the top of the horror genre, and I can't wait to see what he does next. If you would have told me a 3-hour period piece was going to be my favorite movie of the year, I'd have told you you were crazy. I've been having a hard time getting people to watch this because of the length and the subject matter, but please just watch it. While this movie is highly entertaining, and I can't wait to watch it again to see the bromance between the two leads and relive the over-the-top, fresh-feeling fight scenes that no American film has been able to pull off in years, what makes it my favorite movie of the year is that it opened up an entirely new world of cinema to me. When I reviewed this film, the Indian YouTube community began recommending me other Indian films to watch. To date, I've only been able to watch and review 3 others, but they were all so good. I'm not sure what it is about Indian cinema, but every movie seems to be at least 2.5 hours long. Because of this, it's harder to find time to watch these frequently, but I can't wait to watch the 30 plus movies that I've been recommended. If you've never watched an Indian film before, I beg you, watch RRR. It's hilarious, more action-packed than any superhero movie, has the best on-screen bromance of all time, incredible dance sequences, a great love story, and literally anything else that you could want in a movie. It is the most fun I had watching a movie in 2022.